So today I've decided that it's time to do an add-on video about a couple of things. I was getting ready to rebed the original 50 SBD fart, silent but deadly, and I've been doing a bunch of changes on it. And the first thing I did was I checked the scope attachment system and saw that it was broken loose. So I wanted to just go through and point out the inadequacies of factory scope mounting systems. And another thing that's come up, I am far from an internet presence on YouTube, but if any one of my videos or articles were to ever go viral and get a lot of people, then it's incumbent upon me to show safe practices. I've learned this in my teaching. I've taught a lot. I've learned this in the 20 years that I spent on Bench Rest Central. Words have far-reaching effects, and when you're on a public forum or in a public venue of any sort, it's incumbent upon us who are broadcasting information, be it opinion or ratings or right or wrong or whatever, that we send a message of safety. I'm the safety geek, and some people, I have some friends who monitor this, some friends who are doing 50 projects, and a couple who monitor just because they enjoy the content. And I have high quality friends and relatives, and as such they offer constructive criticism. I believe that's one of the biggest things a person could do, one person could do to another. And one of the things that's come up, and I'm taking it very seriously, is that a couple of people have mentioned when you swing the cameras around the room, it looks like you keep a lot of powder in your reloading room. I'm going to show you what this means. One of the shots, I don't even know where it was, but up here in the corner, for instance, I can't zoom this thing, but I'll freeze it for just a second. There's what looks like, and I've swung past, evidently I've swung past this. I can't comment as to the veracity of that. It doesn't matter. It came to me. That means it's true. Somebody saw it. And I'll have an 8-pounder sitting here. I've got another 8-pounder sitting there. Right now, I just realized I did a reloading sequence, and right over there, I've got a whole bunch of pounds of red and green and blue dot up on here. Right now I have more powder in this room than generally. And that's because I'm between episodes. I'm not actually loading right now. I am changing over. But as the 50 BMG goes out and the H322 is headed out the door, I've already brought in those little 1-pounders of shotgun powder because I'm in the middle of this 50 fart sequence, and I'm trying, I'll bring this in a little bit because I'm trying really hard, guys, to find that powder which perfectly matches a completely unknown set of parameters. I need to get a powder. Boy, how do I describe this? I used 322 and 335, and also Vietavuri 130, 133, and 135 to illustrate this on the most accurate gun on the planet, which is the 6 PPC, the most accurate chambering. There are 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 powders. There's about 5 I'm not even going to name that some people will only shoot. But the point is they're within a burn range that's this wide. The difference between 130 and 135, or 130 and 133, or 322 and 335 is so small most people couldn't find it running through the typical range of powders out there. Although some of you more astute may have noticed that I believe it's RL-17 and, boy, now I'm drawing a blank. There are a couple of powders out there that are known for producing, I think it's 4350 and RL. Don't quote me on this. Don't quote me on this. But in many cases, Somebody's out there loading their 22-250 and they'll notice that you can use 4 or 5 or 6 different powders and there's no real appreciable difference. One guy will convince himself he can get a little more velocity out of one. But the bottom line is, you want to use a powder that pressures out so that you can run right up in the very, very top of the burning zone. And an example of that would be, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm trying to explain the safety. I'm working up to the safety aspects of having a bunch of powder in the room, because I don't normally have a bunch of powder in the room. But let's just say that I'm experimenting with powders that finds the one that burns. Like in the case of the PPC, if you're running pressures such that you're getting velocities up to about 3250 or 3300 with a 65 to 68 grain bullet, H322 or N130 are in that range. Now if you go to a slightly heavier bullet or a slightly tighter twist, but more than that, if you try to ramp the velocity up past 3300, you're going to find out that the 322 slash Vitavuri 130 is too hot, which means it pressures out. It starts to hammer your brass before it achieves that velocity. So you go to a slightly slower powder, but you don't go to a lot slower powder. You still want to keep that burning range right up there in the top percentile. Well, I haven't found that yet for this fart project. I'm working on it, and I'm in the high-end, slow-burning shotgun powders. I just found a keg of H110, so I haven't had H110 for years. I haven't had any reason for it, but it falls right in. I'm using 322. And the reason my loading room looks like this is because I've been making some runs out to my powder magazine. And I realized some of this stuff needs to be talked about. To any of you who are going to go through hundreds of pounds of powder, that are going to carry multiple 8-pounders on site, I'm going to back off and say anybody that's running 8-pounders, get them out of the house. Get them out of your loading room. Get them out of your loading area. And when they're in, disperse them. One thing you'll notice about here, it's just automatic that I disperse my powders. I never lump them. Maybe there'll be a table with a couple of 8-pounders and some 1-pound. That'll never happen. My brain can't even function that way. I've grown up dealing with powder magazines and powder storage and what have you. A powder magazine is a real thing. If you are in the blasting industry, or if like us you just like to blow stuff up, or if you have stumps, or if you build pyrotechnics, which we've done for years, you need to have a place to store this stuff. I have a lot of what's called binary explosives, flash powders and tannerite type stuff for making targets for outdoor shoots, which I keep the components separated, binary, completely inert. Flash powder, unmixed, is completely inert. But if you start dumping the components of flash together and start mixing them up without paying attention, especially if you're, well, static will set off flash like you wouldn't believe, but this is not a treatise on how to handle true explosives. It's to talk about, first of all, why I have a bunch of powder in the room and why I'm remiss in doing that. I shouldn't have that on camera. And I just need to come clean. I just need to say, hey, I don't keep this much powder in the reloading room or in the same room. In my case, I live on property. I have a pump house. My pump house or well house is small, but here's how you store powder. This is also how you can store dynamite if you decide. Around here, I'm not licensed to store dynamite. So this is probably never going to come up anywhere because I can go down and buy dynamite anytime, anywhere. Walk into the depot, buy it, bring it, but I have to use it that day. The reason is this. Old school dynamite is ridiculously hard to store. You gotta, the old dynamite magazines, because the question came up on the inner tube lately, is it safe to store powder and primers where the temperature goes up and down and everybody's leaping in and jumping in with absolute BS. In simple fact, you can pour, powder and primers will go through all kinds of wild temperature changes. What you have to worry about is the dew point. What you have to worry about is where the condensation is forming. If you've got a situation where the heat and the cold are causing the building that your stuff is stored in to condense and get damp and moldy, you've screwed up major. But trust me, all through this country out here, all the people that I knew, my dad grew up with, around here, this is timber country. People have been blowing stumps forever, and every farm had a powder magazine. And all you do is just go hack up a little shack, tarp paper it up, throw some shakes on it, get it watertight, stick it out in the back corner somewhere, and store your dynamite. Now, what's important is that you go out there and turn those sticks once a month. You forget this and your shack might just blow up and you'll go out and find a crater in the ground. And that costs money. In the old days it was never a safety issue. It was because you kept it far enough away that the kids weren't playing in it. Duh. And you never shoot at it, by the way, because dynamite goes up when you hit it with a rifle. So some of those old westerns where they shoot at the powder shack is real. You can stand back a few hundred yards, shoot the powder shack, it'll blow sky high. So don't go hiding in the powder magazine. But now, today, modern, we have situations where currently we're in the middle of this COVID BS and supply lines are choked up and we've got a retard that we rented for a president. So he wants to ban assault rifles. All of this stuff is meaning that it's hard to get powder. So if somebody stumbles across 3 8-pounders, they're going to buy them. They're going to pay retarded money to buy 3 8-pounders, and then they're going to go stuff them in their garage or their basement. The question is not, does the heat and cold bother powder? The question is, if I get a fire in my garage because I was triply retarded and I bought an electric car, or I have a gas fire, or I threw rags, there's so many ways a fire could start, then 24 pounds of powder, number one, cannot, will not, blow the whole block up. It can't explode. It can't blow up. It can't. It's going to go foosh and it's going to send a column. It's going to burn super hot. It's going to be like if somebody threw, I don't mean a gas can, but threw a couple of 5-gallon cans of gas on there. Now, nobody's scared of gas. Gasoline is way more dangerous than gunpowder. But gasoline is wet and gunpowder is dry. Gunpowder is like dry gasoline. So, the 8 pounds of powder that you got because you were at a show and somebody had them and you brought them home, stick them in your garage, in and of itself is not going to blow anything up. Nor is the temperature going to affect it. But storing that much together is silly because it produces a fuel load sufficient to ignite things that wouldn't normally ignite. So spread out your fuel load or isolate your fuel load. Any of you fire guys are going to know this, especially you wildland firefighters. You look out across a landscape and see fuel loads and go, oh, that's scary on that slope and this prevailing wind and what have you. Well, gunpowder's the same thing. Unfortunately, most people don't look at it in terms of fuel load. So, either get your whole fuel load into it, like in my case, I have a well house. And the trick here is to pick up for free upright freezers that you see along the roadside for free or for giveaway. Or go on Craigslist. Buy old upright refrigerators and freezers. I just buy them when they come up. I don't buy them. I work construction, so I drive around all the time, and I normally have a flatbed. This works so good for me because I'll see a freezer for free. A big, tall, upright kitchen, fridge, or freezer. I don't care. Or it'll be 25 bucks works or something. But this is the perfect powder storage for the homeowner guy. The things that you need to know about when it comes to a true powder magazine is that it has to have 3 hard sides and a soft side, called the blowout side, which is where the deflagration heads. It directs the deflagration, or the explosion in the case of a powder magazine. But in all cases, it's hard to contain, and besides, containment works 2 ways. I'll give you an example of that. Everybody has heard about, and probably built if they've got half a soul, pipe bombs. pipe bombs are just something kids do. They're totally awesome. Take a piece of pipe, fill it with something that's deflagrates quickly and has its own oxidizer, like match heads or old-fashioned BP or dump out firecrackers, all of these things that we did. And then you contain it, and when it pops or ruptures the pipe, it makes a boom. It's really no louder or more effective than a garbage bag full of oxygen and acetylene or any number of other things. These little soda bottle bombs with probably there's a bunch of different ways to just make a 2-liter bottle pop. And I'm not going to turn this into some kind of an improvised boom deal, but everybody should know the 3 or 4 different ways to put something inside of a... Now understand that a liter or 2-liter bottle is strong enough that you can drive a truck on it and it won't break. All that means is when you build the pressure high enough that it pops, it moves enough air that it creates a boom. We're simple critters, and all that happens, if you took a stick and shook it hard enough, it would make a boom to your ear. It's just compressed air coming and hitting the drum of your ear. And we like booms. Oh, that was fun. So there's many different ways to, but we're talking about here is safety. And the soda bottle bomb, as it's called, is not safe. If you're near it within 5 feet, the concussion's going to hurt you. It'll crack asphalt. It'll break a sidewalk. Gunpowder won't. And if you can take, there was a post on the inner tube just recently, like probably still up today. Somebody was asking about primer and powder storage, and a bunch of yahoos jumped in and gave him absolute BS information, but I'm not involving myself in internet forums anymore because. So anyway, this guy says, somebody says, well, because what we're worried about is moisture more so than heat and cold, go ahead and store your primers in their original packaging in 50 caliber ammo cans, and that's great advice, beautiful advice. Some whinging hosebag jumps on and says, oh no, don't do that, don't do that. You turn your primers into a bomb. They're already explosives. Well, this is ignorance. And this is one of the reasons why I stay off the internet forums now, is because the ignorant people come on and say things, and then when you correct them, they try to argue. The simple fact is that a pipe bomb works by having a solid containment. You build a pipe bomb out of copper pipe, it goes, squirts a flame. You can do better with a PVC pipe. You can do way better with a cardboard tube, which is what the pyrotechnics experts have been doing for years. A firecracker is a cardboard tube with a little bit of deflagrant inside and capped ends. Pop! It pops the cardboard tube. Cardboard pops. And then you go all the way up to ductile iron, and you get something called a pipe bomb, which if you're close enough could hurt you, like getting hit in the face with a baseball bat when that piece of pipe comes out. But they're way overplayed by the media. In no cases is any of this true HE, true bombs. These are just bursts. So, you can store your primers inside of a 50 caliber ammo box and consider it to be safe, because I'm sorry, you weasel on the internet. You take a 50 cal ammo box with square sides and put a deflagrant in it and pop it. It's just going to open up and hiss. And in fact, those primers in there popping like firecrackers will probably not even lay the 50 cal can out. It's a good way to control the explosion. Here in this room, when I've got an 8-pounder and a 1-pounder and an 8-pounder spread around, I spread the fuel load. So if the fire comes through this room and it'll go poof here, and then a couple minutes later it'll go poof over there. And to be clear, up here in the corner, I shouted across, I take these old, there's probably 15 of them in here, speaking of storage. I cut the side out of these and I stick them all up around the store. I got rags and bags and all kinds of things in here. So these are not fuel loads. I've got one here on the way out the door, and I've got those 4 up there that I'm using. But in a powder magazine type of situation, I say buy a freezer or 2 or 3. Decommission them, don't plug them in. Or if you plug them in, if the light works, just plug them in and let the light work. If you're really, really good like that, drill a hole in the side and stick a goldenrod in there, or run it up through. But a stand-up upright refrigerator or freezer makes a really good small storage magazine for gunpowders. Keep it away from the house. In my case, it's in a well house. If you're living in a subdivision city block, hopefully it's fenced, go back in the back corner, put up a little shed. Buy a super cheap plastic shed from Home Depot. Stick this upright fridge in there. Now you have to run power to it. You really need a light bulb or something in there just to push moisture out. Now, to all of you scientists out there, please cut me some slack. Don't. The simple fact is, if you take a freezer or a fridge upright, put a little 60-watt light bulb in there, or smaller, 30-watt or something. Turn it on, you can store your powder in there, and for some reason or another, it will stay dry and not necessarily warm. But heat and cold aren't the problem. The problem is moisture problems. So, I say get it away from the house. Putting it in the freezer is good. Hot and cold, don't bother it too much. And it can't blow up. Now, I just wanted to point out, the other reason I put this on is because I want to show you my March Genesis on the way to Japan, because it's busted. It hasn't even been on this Picatinny rail, but it's been on the other one. And you'll notice that this pick rail, I just wanted to show how hideously ineffectual factory setups are. This is the Savage that I'm currently working on. And as I said, I don't know a whole lot about Savages, but I've never found them, other than their scope mounting system and their trigger system and the floating bolt head and the misalignments, and I can't go back to that trigger. The trigger is beyond belief, but they're not bad. I'm not here to pick on Savages. They shoot, I think I'm using it for this project. But you'll notice there's residue on here. The first thing that happened when I got to this thing and I started tearing it apart to rebed it was I checked and this was already flopping. The simple fact is that these two little 648 screws and these two little, I MEK'd this, I got the MEK in the background. I degreased this like crazy. I glued it down, not a month or two ago when I started working on this thing. And I epoxied this base down and I put a light scope on it. Well, in the meantime, I've gone to a slightly larger scope just because I'm starting to test this thing. And I may or may not have. I don't think I ever put the Genesis on, which would be the truly biggest test. But I haven't taken the time yet to punch these. So now this is all coming back apart. I'm starting to shoot it for effect, and I'm going to punch pins into here, hardened steel pins. I'm going to got the big weight here on the front. You can see the marks on it from I put this thing on with a pipe wrench. And now I'm finally going to get this tightened down to the 150 pounds, and I'm going to pin this. And finally I'm going to put this thing together for effect. Well, the Genesis is off and gone, and see if I can get some groups out of it, because I have been fighting it. But that was my exposition today, was powder storage and scope mounting, and I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to